Good day and welcome back to another DBZ Dokkan video. In this video we're going to talk about my top 30 picks for leader skills in DBZ Dokkan. So just to kind of preface this isn't to say the top 30 units or anything, but leader skills have a very large determining factor in the game. And I want to kind of list some of the units and leader skills that I think are the best so that players can understand essentially, or have an idea of who they should be keeping an eye out for when building teams or when trying to obviously build for certain events. Now, there's two factors to a leader skill. Firstly, we need to talk about the 200% factor. So a lot of the times, categories of units now fall under a 200% leader skill. You get two types of leader skill. You get leader skills that are made up of a 170% and a 30%, and you get leader skills that are made up of a pure 200%. That is for carnival LRs. Now, a big thing with the 170% leader skills most of the time is that they have a larger range of versatility. So although they're lower skills overall, and not every unit will fit under the 200% lead, well, most times won't, they're generally more versatile. They usually cover two categories, they usually cover multiple categories with their additional 30%, whereas the straight 200% leader skills are really powerful, but are way more limited in terms of team design. So when factoring this in, I kind of wanted to talk about, obviously, 200%. I think it's important to list them, but I do want to say that I think overall the 170-30 splits are better for team building as of right now. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are the strongest ones in the game. I think there are some super strong straight 200% leader skills, but I think right now 170 and 30 splits gives you a bit more range with the team building and a bit more flexibility. So I'm going to just go through based on typings. There's no specific order to any of these, but the Rose is definitely a very good leader skill. He's got super bosses and corroded body and mind, but super bosses is just a great category in general, and he's a great pseudo pick if you don't have the AGL Tech Zamasu. Probably the strongest extreme physical lead that we have out there, and has some decent flexibility in terms of his lead design. Next is obviously the Rose, the Heroes Rose. I don't want to include too many Heroes units, but Heroes Rose has at least a 3 category lead, which is quite versatile. On the super physical side, we have the anniversary LRs, or the 8th anniversary LRs. So any units that I don't include here, by the way, I will cover at the end. So if I don't have them, I'll include them at the end, so like God Goku, for example. But just to talk about the 8th anniversary LRs, they're obviously great. They cover 2 categories. They have a good coverage with their 30%. They themselves are very good units, and they allow you to build some pretty decent teams. On the 200% side, you have Trunks. The shame about Trunks is that his leader skill does not include Future Gohan, whereas Future Gohan's leader skill includes his. But it's more than fine. Trunks has a great leader skill. Time Traveler is a very powerful category, and he's a great example of how a limited 200% leader skill can still function very, very well overall. Still talking about super physical, God Goku is not here, so I'm going to talk about him at the end section. But I do think that Ultimate Gohan has a great leader skill. Yes, I do understand that people aren't the biggest fan of him as a unit, but he is essentially a 200% lead for every single hybrid Saiyan in the game, as well as also being a great lead for movie heroes and superheroes. So he's pretty solid on a lot of fronts, actually, as a unit, and his leader skill leads to some great team designs, very much akin to Tech LR Piccolo. Moving into the strength, on the extreme strength side, there's not a lot of great units here in terms of leader skill. The best ones are probably going to be the Cooler. So Strength Cooler is probably the best extreme strength lead. He has coverage for 2 great categories, and his 30% applies to a lot of units on both of them, which I think overall is pretty good. I do think Hellfighter 17's one is decent, but I think the category itself is just so limited that there's not much you can really do in terms of wiggle room. And very much akin, having like Super Hearts is great, but I think you're better off having other Dragon Ball Heroes units, and Super Hearts Time Traveler's ability doesn't really work for him because of how his passive works and just how he works in general. With that being said, of course, Taking a look now at the super strength side, I think again to talk about the 200% lead that I think obviously is quite good. Future Gohan, so now he has the inverse of Trunks, whereas Trunks can't include him, he can include Trunks, and I think this makes his leader skill holistically better. Obviously he is missing some units, like he won't be able to take on units like LR in Cell and things like that, but generally speaking Future Saga covers so much of a broad spectrum that I think his team is still brilliant, and he has a ton of health under his team leader skill. So though very limited, it is a super powerful leader skill right now in the game overall. And then super strength actually is lacking quite a few really strong leader skills overall. I do think Gamma 1 is a really good decision. I think both Gammas are great leaders because of the fact that they lead 3 categories and have 3 additional 30% leads. So they have a ton of coverage when you're building teams. Very similarly, I think this is also an okay leader, but I'm not going to include them. I just want to mention them because they themselves, I think, are too limited. The Android Cell Saga component to their 200% lead does mean that they're kind of restricted if that category doesn't get buffs for a while. Going into the extreme int side of things, really lacking on the extreme int side. I think realistically, Piccolo is and stands to be pretty much the only really great leader skill that you can use. Of course, Giant Form is not really a major component of this, but he still leads 2 great categories, and he has good coverage with his 30%, so you can do some really unique team builds with him, and are able to really kind of make him work really nicely in terms of being a lead. With that being said, I think the only other real int lead of note is Perfect Cell. I think he's got a great leader skill in terms of Android Cell Saga, but I think outside of that he is very limited, obviously, being a single category lead. In terms of Super Int, we actually have a great selection of characters here that are really good as leaders. So on the 200% side, we have obviously Gohan, who I'll talk about a bit later, but we have the Int Super Saiyan trio. 200% lead for Super Saiyan is huge. Super Saiyan is a category that's going to get buffed at least once or twice a year regularly and will always be relevant. Super Saiyan SS4 Goku is also quite solid. The GT Heroes component is fine. The full power component is fine, but it's the fact that he adds 30% to hybrid or pure Saiyans, which means pretty much any addition to either of those categories will fall under his lead, which is the major thing about him. That I think is super important. When you have those really good general extra 30%, you get a really wide range of spectrum of units that you can really run under a high lead. And then of course we have the Int LR Trunks and Vegeta. I'm not going to talk about them too much, but Bond, Parent and Child is a great category. So anytime that category pops up, I think it's an automatic win. I do want to mention Android 17 and 18. I'm not going to include them, but they will gain a lot of traction very soon with the EZAs that are coming with the 9th anniversary. So although right now they may not be in my top picks, I think by the time the anniversary rolls around, they definitely do lead a brilliant leader skill and brilliant teams, and they have some decent flexibility, as sibling bonds allows for quite a flexible team build. Extreme Tech is really lacking. We have Android 17 and 18, who are literally just a 2 category 170% lead, and we have LR Zamasu. Now obviously I don't have LR Zamasu, so we'll talk about him a little bit later, but he's really holding up a lot of extreme teams on his own, which is great, but yeah, realistically isn't great for the categories and just extreme in general. On the super side, things are a lot better on the tech side. You have powerful comeback Goku, again a flat 200% lead, but powerful comebacks in the okay enough category. The real big winners though are the movie heroes units. So the SS God Boys still have to this day one of the best leader skills in the game. Coverage from movie heroes and Power Beyond Super Saiyan, and the additional 30% for Kamehameha is brilliant. They edge out the physical SS4s for me, as I just find them to be exceptional. Tech Piccolo, I'm not going to talk about too much, but Battle of Wits and Superheroes keep some good coverage, very similar to Gohan being a very solid unit that can lead 2 powerful categories overall and gives himself enough room to give himself enough to play with. Tech Trunks, don't think his leader skills are really worth it, and then it's very limited, very much like the Goku Gohan unit. Tech, World Tournament Goku, very good. Earthbred Fighters, huge category. World Tournament, not so much of a big deal, but Earthbred Fighters, very, very good. And just the overwhelming strength of that category is very good. An honorable mention for Into Yamcha, who, although I'm not including him, again is also that Earthbred Fighters leader skill is huge. Earthbred Fighters is one of the best categories in the game, and honestly speaking is really fantastic. Now finally we come to the AGL side of things. So on the AGL side for Extreme, it's just really desperate. Realistically speaking, you have maybe AGL Zamasu, which is a single type, single category, single type lead. That is how desperate things are for Extreme AGL. Obviously there is the GT bosses Omega Shenron, but 200% for GT bosses is just not viable. To be entirely honest with you, it's not a great leader skill. It's probably the worst 200% lead. Then we have the AGL Super Saiyan God SS units. I unironically think they probably have the third or second best leader skill in the game, if not even the first. I think they're brilliant and they're really solid. Shout out to Captain Ginyu, who leads some very strong categories, although has aged a little bit as a unit himself, but honorable mention for him. But yeah, the Super Saiyan God SS was really strong. I think they're an exceptional pair of units themselves, but their leader skill is huge. It's going to stand a really good test of time, be really useful. AGL Kale is a unit that's obviously on the up because of the Universe 6 buffs, but her category lead is actually not bad at all. I think she's always had a pretty good category lead. It's the restriction to her to have Universe 6 units, but that's kind of solved with the buffs to her category. Gamma 2 is very similar to Gamma 1, just big coverage with this leader skill. And similarly for SS4 Vegito, Limit Breaker, they just have big coverage, 3 categories, 3 30% coverages. You can build a lot of great teams. SS4 Vegito Limit Breaker is obviously a bit limited and passive, but overall still good. Like, those leader skills just allow you to really flex out, to really just kind of engage different units and build some really wacky teams that, yes, are a bit strange, but ultimately are still a ton of fun. I want to honorably mention the Tech Gobros, a unit that got an easy air that maybe wasn't so exciting, but a siblings bond Goku's family lead is always going to be a very powerful leader skill that people mustn't underestimate. Similarly with AGL LR Gohan, Kamehameha is a huge category and super strong. And although I'm mentioning them, the reason they're not in the list is because the Tech God Boys basically do their leader skill better, but they are a great leader skill in terms of their coverage, the AGL Super Saiyan Duo. Now let's talk a little bit about the units that I don't have, that obviously I have somewhat mentioned already in this video, but I want to highlight them so that you know I am specifically mentioning them. So let's talk firstly about Gohan. Bond of Master and Disciple. Gohan, I think, is really, really good, really, really strong. 200% lead. Bond of Master and Disciple is a very good category. Tech LR's Masu, brilliant, great leader skill, gonna help out tons and tons of categories, and really keeps Extreme floating with how much coverage he gives and the 150% to Extreme. And yeah, just basically is a key component to floating or keeping Extreme going. God Goku, Pure Saiyans, Hybrid Saiyans is always something that's great. It's always a category that's going to be buffed, and God Goku himself is flexible enough to really work along those lines. Then we have the Strength 8th Anniversary units. I wouldn't say their leader skill is as good as the physical ones, if I'm being entirely honest, but I do think it's still a pretty good leader skill. And then finally we have the AGL Turtle School Goku. I don't actually like his leader skill that much. Turtle School doesn't excite me. But the big thing with it that I will say is it does include obviously all the Gokus. And you get a ton of Gokus every year, so it's not a category I can just flat out ignore. Even though I don't find it the most interesting, it still is inherently strong, just due to the fact that you basically can have a ton of Gokus in one team. But yeah, that's basically summarizes it. I think Android 21 is an honorable shout out for the flexibility of your lead. But I would say these units are, at least for me, the best leader skills to build around, to design teams around, and themselves are obviously very strong units. And yeah, that's it from me. Bye.